Now that we're 6 episodes into WandaVision, that last one gave us a lot more to think about than even the fifth one did. I just wanted to say before we got started that I really appreciated the reference to Malcolm in the Middle throughout the whole episode. I liked that, and I also had more of an appreciation for the commercial that we got because that was more my style. It was that kind of commercial a lot when I was 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 kind of ages. It kind of reminded me of the Apple Jacks commercial combined with the Tricks Are for Kids commercial. So that made me kind of nostalgic.
Yeah, the animation for that kind of reminded me. It was like the nose and knee deserves puffs indeed style animation to me. But then it also, like, I kind of remember a lot of those, like, turn of the century commercials that were like middle aged people came up with this who were like, oh, what were my kids into in the 90s? And, like, they're still kind of using 90s sensibilities like sharks and surfing and, like, sunglasses and, like, whoa, dude.
You seem pretty convinced that a couple of the main characters might have been Skrulls. If you want to elaborate on that, if you still feel that way, and talk about which characters you think might be Skrulls.
There was an article that was like, okay, so how do Darcy and Jimmy know so much about all these things? We know these things because we've watched all the movies and we don't really question it because, oh yeah, I remember that from that movie. But like, how would they know that? Because it's not like these fights would have been broadcast. They were in like top secret countries. Like fighting in Wakanda, like they can't surveil into Wakanda. Jimmy had scroll written on the whiteboard before makes me kind of wonder if Jimmy and or Darcy might be like scrolls or they might be like Talos and the other scroll that then become Nick Fury and Maria Hill because like maybe their cover's blown and they gotta like turn into somebody else by the between now and like Far From or the Spider-Man Europe Far From Home, I think. But they could be and like the fact that we haven't seen Darcy in like 8 years, like what she'd been doing in these 8 years, she could have been replaced with a scroll.
It sounds like you're saying that if they're Skrulls, assuming that they are, it sounds like they're trying to direct the attention to somebody else and get them thinking about other people so that they're not in the line of fire as far as suspects. My one counter to what you're saying is I believe that the events of this show are taking place after Far From Home, though.
Everything I've seen or read about it is that like this is only 3 weeks after they beat Thanos for the second time and bring everybody back, and Far From Home is like a couple months after, which is kind of weird that like that would be that far out and might have like potential plot holes that like oh this happened and then everything's fine because like they wouldn't have known when they were making that they were going to make this, or they'd have some way by the time this is done to memory wipe everybody between now and that of the hex.
They were talking about in the school newscast how it was, oh, now all of a sudden everybody's back. And that was the first thing that they talked about on sort of like the morning news announcements or whatever in school. So I kind of got the impression that Far From Home picked up just like days after. I didn't think it was quite months. I believe it was Far From Home where Talos and whoever were being Maria Hill and Nick Fury, and then we find out at the end of the movie that Nick Fury's actually on a helicarrier somewhere and whatever.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and watch Far From Home again, I guess, but everyone's saying that like that was months after, and it's because it's probably not that many months. Like it would probably take place soon after this, and that would make sense because that's why Doctor Strange would be unavailable. But like the fact that Nick Fury and Maria Hill, like or the scrolls that are pretending to be them, would know that Doctor Strange would be unavailable is that like if they were Darcy and Jimmy and they watched Doctor Strange swoop in and solve this.
Well, part of what you're saying is that these characters realistically shouldn't know about some of the stuff that they are acting like they do know. However, what would make a Skrull know any more than those characters would know? At least Darcy and Jimmy Woo are probably privy to some of the files that probably contain some of the information about some of the prior battles and whatnot. And also, if Sword is sort of a subsidiary of S.H.I.E.L.D., Shield kind of makes everything that happened in the MCU and in real comics, just anything that happens, they kind of make it their business. I guess maybe the workaround of them not being a Skrull is just the fact that they're affiliated with S.W.O.R.D. and therefore affiliated with knowledge that they don't necessarily need to be on screen experiencing to retroactively learn later on.
But who's taking close-up footage of Carol punching Thanos and, like, Wanda punching, or, like, blasting Thanos that they would see?
Probably somebody made a report. I don't know, maybe somebody that was a first-hand eyewitness of that event, they wrote that in their report and that's how they knew. Or maybe some of the heroes talked about it that saw it.
But yeah, that wouldn't necessarily make them, like, Skrulls any more than, like, they would know. But it is kind of weird that they do know that, and there was an article about that.
Yeah, there wouldn't really have any way of knowing that other than secondhand unless they were a part of that battle, which as far as we know, Jimmy Woo and Darcy weren't. So, I mean, they would have had to have been taking the identity of somebody that was in that fight then to have seen that firsthand if they didn't somehow read a file or a briefing on all that later on.
Or they were, like, at the space base that Fury is now at that was, like, has surveillance methods or something.
Do you still have the same thoughts on Tyler Hayward that you had prior? In the last episode, we were discussing that it's possible that he's probably some type of Skrull, or we might have even went so far as to accuse him of being Talos, and there was also some discussion about possibly him being Mephisto. How have your thoughts stayed the same or changed on him after watching this episode?
Well, Talos turned out to be a good guy, so I don't think he... But that would, like, if he's a Skrull, that would kind of lend to a theory that, like, Darcy and or Jimmy would be keeping tabs on him and keeping him from, like, doing something bad. But I think he's mostly just, like, an evil military hawk type guy that's, like, trying to get rid of all the supers and, like, be the big powerhouse of the world. Also, they pointed out on Nerdist that Hayward has Hydra in the name.
If that's the case, do you think Tyler Hayward is somehow connected with one of the Von Struckers?
He could be. At the very least, he could be like a work associate.
You were saying during the episode that you think it's also possible that maybe Quicksilver is Mephisto, or the new version that showed up at the end of episode 5. Do you want to talk more about that theory?
Because his hair kind of looks Mephisto-y. That was the only thing. Mephisto kind of has the, like, pointy butt-shaped hair that, like, Dracula has in, like, the Dracula movie. And, like, that Quicksilver does... It wasn't so much, like, the slicked back hair with the, like, swooshy Hermes bangs as, like, he kind of had the pointy butts at the back of his head like Wolverine has. And that Mephisto has, like, a swoopier version of. So that was the only thing I was noticing. But they keep going back and forth of, like, whether it's Mephisto or Nightmare, or whether they're, like, mishmashing Nightmare with Mephisto for this. He also said, giving everybody woo-woo nightmares, so that could be a reference to how he's Nightmare. And then he shows up as a zombie. So he might be Nightmare as well, or, like, Nightmare working for Mephisto, or something like that.
Speaking of characters that seem to know more than they really should know, it's obvious that Quicksilver is fully privy to what's going on with Wanda, and how the fact that she's obviously created this hexagonal dome of alt reality and is manipulating the population to go about their lives in a fantasy way. Some of the people that are in this dome that she's created probably aren't even from there, but now they're under some sort of spell that makes them think that they have some sort of daily life there. The one thing that I noticed from this episode was when she was talking to Herb was like, do you want something changed? Which is similar to how Agatha broke the barrier last episode when she said, do you want to take that again?
Yeah, and it seems like Agatha might know less than we had thought, or probably it seemed like she did before.
I was going to bring that up as well, how it does seem like we might have been a little bit off on that, or at least I was. I think both of us were assuming that she was fully aware of what was going on, but upon having Vision, I guess, use his power to, I guess, somehow jolt her out of the thing that Wanda's doing to control everybody, it seems like, yeah, I'm not really sure how Vision is able to circumvent that and bring people back to their normal reality.
Yeah, and I'm wondering why he doesn't leave, like, why he puts them back. He doesn't, like, leave them out.
It might be because if they are taken out of their haze for too long, then all of a sudden Wanda is alerted to it, and I don't think he wants to aggravate her. I don't think he wants to make her in a more aggressive state. I think if, as far as she's concerned, everything is as it is supposed to be in her mind, he can go upon continuing his investigation quietly. And she's kind of getting wind of it more and more because he made up the excuse like he was on patrol, and then Herb was like, oh, he's not on patrol. And so little by little, the subtle ways that Vision's trying to avoid her, she's catching on by accident. But I think Vision thinks as long as she doesn't think that anything's off, he can get to the bottom of it. The other thing that I noticed, which was kind of odd, was obviously Vision's existence is tied to this hexagonal thing. And I don't know how that really works. Like, somehow or other, Wanda was able to fix him in this hexagonal dome, and then obviously he couldn't leave because he kept breaking apart and disintegrating back to being dead. I don't really understand how that works, because obviously she has the ability to create life or whatever, but I don't understand why that doesn't extend to out of the bubble. I mean, I don't know why that hexagonal bubble thing is even necessary, because it seems like when Charles Xavier does the similar kind of thing where he sort of freezes reality or manipulates everybody all at once, there isn't any kind of dome surrounding everything. I almost wonder if the dome thing is just for the audience's benefit to tangibly see sort of the range of her effect.
Like when Jean Grey does telekinesis, you see pink little fizzles, but those don't really exist. It's just so that the reader knows that it's there. Or like they don't really make literal swoosh lines when they run fast, but it seems like this hex actually is there, and it might just be like Wanda is focusing herself in it, because like when Psylocke does telekinesis stuff, she actually does make a sword there. And it's like a sword that anybody could see. So people do, it might be like a totem to focus herself.
We also kind of got confirmation in this last episode that there is something going on the insides of Monica Rambeau, meaning that she probably did get transformed because of going into the hexagon. At least her reaction would lead me to believe that she wasn't aware of her powers or whatnot, but at the same time, maybe she did know and she was just acting like she didn't know. Do you think that she maybe had the powers the whole time, and then maybe Darcy just assumed that her cells were changing on a molecular level because of going into the hexagon, and she correlated the two things?
Like that those are old like readings on and like charts on her cells that were just there already?
Well, it sounds like Darcy, as the scientist, was trying to make sense of why the cells were different than a normal human cells. Maybe she just assumed that the cells were normal going in because they probably didn't hook her up and do tests on her prior. So maybe she just assumed that, okay, well, your cells were normal, and now that you've been in and out, your cells have changed. But she also said that your cells are changing on a molecular level, and it sounds like she's been in twice. So I don't know if they had normal cells and then did a CAT scan after the first time and then a CAT scan after the second time, and I don't know if there was a progression of cellular change, or like we said, maybe Monica Rambeau fully knew ahead of time that she had the powers and she was just trying to play it down like she didn't really know. I don't know if that's over convoluting the concept. It sounds like the show is...
We're probably going to get a definitive answer on that by the end of the season. I think the passing, like, because she passed, it's the passing through the wall, and then passing through the wall again.
Darcy's obviously saying that going in and out of the hexagon is what's created a cellular change. I'm just wondering if the cells were like that either way, and she just came up with that as a correlation to explain why that happened, because she couldn't conceptualize the cells doing that without some other explanation.
Because there would have had to be something about her cells that would have let her through the barrier in the first place when everybody else was like getting blocked out.
So do you think that this molecular change of the cells existed before she even went in the bubble the first time, and that's why she was able to enter?
Well, apparently there are like changes that they can track from the.
And at the same time, like that other guy with the hazmat suit that we saw in maybe the first or second episode with the Bumblebee hazmat suit, do we have any charts or anything? What happened to him? Because did he go back, or is he still
in there somewhere?
So I was gonna say, because he doesn't probably have any sort of different cells or anything like that. So
if they track him down and find out, they might know.
But I'm just saying that leads credence to the fact that it might not be necessary for Monica Rambeau to have different cells in order to enter, because that other guy probably has normal human cells and was able to enter, and we haven't seen them come back from the dome. So towards the end of that episode, obviously she was like extending out the dome, and it's sort of like a slow chase. Tyler Hayward and a group of people, and obviously Monica and their group with Jimmy Woo or whatever, they're kind of trying to outrun the dome. What are your predictions as far as what's going to happen with that? Do you think they're going to get caught in the dome?
I think Tyler Hayward is gonna like narrowly escape and like come back with more reinforcements and bring in like a big army and have a big like it'll be a big like military fight with like them sending in actual like tanks and planes and like not even caring or like trying to hide it, and then Wanda's gonna like blast them all down, and then also whoever the Monica's person is, if it's like Reed or Blue Marble, they might be showing up next episode. Also, it'll be funny to see what Darcy turned into, because she did get sucked up into the bubble now.
I was just gonna say the resolution of what's gonna come of the end, or the sort of cliffhanger at the end of that episode, that could also lend some credence to your theory about the Skrulls, because possibly Skrulls are immune to it, or maybe Darcy, it almost looked like she was changing into something, so I don't know if that was because of the dome or because she's a Skrull. And another thing is, you said that it's possible Jimmy Woo is a Skrull of some type. If they, assuming that he and Monica escape, it could be like, okay, well, we're escaped and all those people are trapped in that dome. By the way, I'm actually a Skrull and I have a whole army of people on this helicarrier that I can go get.
Well, they don't have a whole army. They were like endangered and like on the run, but...
Well, I guess my point is, like, if he is a Skrull, he's obviously got some Skrull contacts that he can go get and be like, yeah, I'm actually a Skrull, I'm not Jimmy Woo, and desperate times call for desperate measures. I have these contacts that I can get to try to resolve this. We also got to remember that I think that Doctor Strange is showing up in some capacity as well. So, I don't know, do you think Doctor Strange is the contact that was alluded to prior?
The cosmic engineer, the aerospace engineer? I don't think he'd be an aerospace engineer.
So do you still think that the contact was Mr. Fantastic? Do you think we're going to get Reed Richards and Doctor Strange? Another thing that makes me think it's probably not any of the Fantastic Four is because I thought Kevin Feige came out and said that none of the Fantastic Four are cast yet. So if that's the case, I mean, I guess he could be lying to keep the suspense, but at the same time, I don't think that we'd get Doctor Strange and the Fantastic Four. I think that would probably take away some of the luster of having Doctor Strange show up on the small screen, so to speak.
Well, we know that it leads right into Multiverse of Madness. Like, whatever's happening now it's supposed to spill right over into Multiverse of Madness. So we don't really know for sure whether, like, Benedict Cumberbatch is going to show up. It might be, like, Wong showing up and being... He might be the one that's got to, like, get her and then take her to the Sanctum.
You were talking before we started recording how you think that there's a small chance that possibly they're going to connect the Strucker family dynamic with Mephisto. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
So it kind of crossed my mind that, like, what if Baron Strucker in the MCU has just been Mephisto in human form this whole time? Because he's got a weapon called the Satan Claw. So he might just be, like, the Satan of the MCU. And he can take lots of forms, and one of them is Baron Strucker.
As of right now, if you were to make a definitive prediction, which you're most closely leaning toward regarding Mephisto and being a Skrull or not, who do you think is likeliest?
It's probably going to be someone that hasn't been revealed yet, but then it might be something like where they like flashback and like, oh, I was here all along, or they may have been like, oh, well, I'm Mephisto now, but they like they'll play back to different old stuff and like, oh, I was that extra right there, or like I was in the background right there, and they could like Forrest Gump him into old scenes.
Do you think we're going to get a definitive resolution to this whole plot within this show? Or do you think this show is going to be ongoing throughout some of the Multiverse of Madness stuff? Do you think it's possible that Wanda and Vision and maybe some of the other characters from this show up in some of these other next couple movies because this hasn't gonna be, or this won't be definitively solved after 9 episodes?
Part of like making so many shows is it's kind of like comics now, how they have like several different comics titles going on at once and everything spills into each other, and like things that might be off in the on one panel build into something like issues later that you didn't see coming, and things like get resolved, but then there's like loose ends that bleed into other storylines.
What's your prediction for the next episode, and also what's your guess as far as what Darcy is going to be come next episode?
She might become like a canonical comics character that she was her before, but like she might turn into like Abigail Brand and go on to lead Sword once they get rid of Hayward.
And you think that'll be in the next episode? You think that she was whatever, Darcy, and then you think she's just gonna be almost retconned into something new so that the actress can stay in the MCU but have more of a compelling background than Natalie Portman's friend?
Yes.
I like the idea of somebody being a Skrull, and it wouldn't surprise me if that ends up being one of the main things that brings a resolution to the show. For anybody that's listening and able to comment, I'd be curious what any of you all think as far as who's a Skrull, who's Mephisto, things like that. I want answers as to why is Vision only able to exist within this hexagon dome thing. I want answers as to why Quicksilver knows what he knows. I'm sort of leaning towards the fact that I think he probably isn't Mephisto. I think that Quicksilver was sent in by a separate entity that is probably trying to combat Scarlet Witch. I think it kind of goes back to something you said last episode, how I believe you said something along the lines when the Dark Avengers was going on, they brought in Quicksilver almost as a consultant to try to reason with Wanda and keep her sort of under wraps. It kind of feels like that's sort of what's going on here. How he's like, yeah, I got shot, and then next thing I know, you were calling me. And he was saying things like, I'm your brother, you can talk to me, I'm not your husband. And so he was sort of able to reason with her, and she was more open and honest with him than she was with Vision or any other character. So I almost wonder if there's something along those lines going on, where similar, that they sent in Quicksilver because they knew that he could get through to her. And I think it just happens to be the 20th Century Fox Quicksilver because more of the audience liked him, he resonated better, and I think that was just a straight up retcon.
I don't think that he's gonna end up being the real Quicksilver. I think he's gonna be someone they sent in as Quicksilver because that's who she would want to see, and he's gonna flip into somebody else eventually.
So you think maybe the Quicksilver is actually a Skrull?
Probably not a scroll, but like some type of shape-shifting demon that like would trick somebody that could shapeshift into somebody else, or like maybe they sent somebody in that became Quicksilver when they entered through the wall, but I don't think that that's actually going to be the real Quicksilver. But I think it's funny that he said like, oh, that would kick ass because the other Quicksilver actor did play Kick-Ass.
Who do you think the they is that's sending in Quicksilver? Who do you think this third party that we're kind of alluding to is that's sending him? And then also, since you're saying that it's not Quicksilver, what do you think they were before they went in the dome and switched?
I mean, they would probably be some like big Doctor Strange villain, like Mephisto or Nightmare, or people were even saying Shumagorath maybe. And then it'd be some lackey of theirs that they'd have sent. I'm not sure if Tyler Hayward would be like connected to anything mystical or magical, but I think they could be using him like because he's a convenient patsy for them, or a convenient, maybe not, that's not the right word, but like a convenient, I guess, tool for them.
When you say them, you think that it's the same person that's sort of controlling what we're seeing as Quicksilver. You think they're also controlling Hayward?
Not directly, but seeing that like his ambitions would align and be convenient for them.
You and I both kind of thought that Tyler Hayward was either Mephisto. Seemingly, I think we gave him way more credit than he really is. At this point, based on how he was sort of panicking and freaking out and talking into the walkie-talkie, hoping that somebody could hear him, I think he's just kind of a hothead guy that's not actually as smart as he should be.
Some like military hack that.
I don't actually think he's anybody all that important. I think he's just probably this Tyler Hayward guy, and I think he's a disposable, like you said, kind of a military hack that got the job and really shouldn't. Because he even said that I got the job because I was really the only one that could get the job, and it should have gone to Maria, or should have gone to Monica Rambeau. I no longer have him in that kind of echelon, just based on how he reacted to the dome expanding. That could make sense if he's stupid enough to basically play along with whatever this alternate entity that's going along with what you said, assuming that there's this third party, whether it's Nightmare, Mephisto, someone or other, sent what we're seeing as Quicksilver into the dome to try to, I guess, reason with or distract Wanda from whatever their agenda is. I don't know if Tyler Hayward is just stupid enough where his actions go along with whatever this third party wants to happen, but I really don't think he's the one that's pulling the strings just based on how he reacted.
Yeah, probably not.
The last thing I wanted to add in, and this is an observation I made from the episode, just kind of a minor complaint. When Vision was off investigating in the outskirts of the town, in the area where obviously the bodies were zombies and decrepit because they weren't in the immediate focus of Wanda, therefore their functions weren't working super well. This is somewhat of a probably editing or continuity error. I think this is nothing to do with the script. I just think it's a issue that they didn't think about in post. It kind of annoyed me that Vision, when he was walking through, that you could clearly see his breath. Given that he's supposed to be an android of sorts, he wouldn't have condensation from his breathing or whatever. You wouldn't see the mist coming out into the air. When Quicksilver and Wanda are talking and conversing and walking around, you don't see that. So obviously it's something that they took out in post. I think that's just something that they missed or whatever. It's somewhat of an error that probably realistically shouldn't be shown. And it's just something I noticed, just a minor complaint, but overall I liked the episode.